She wasn't famous. She wasn't powerful. Just an ordinary young woman on her way to school. But in one unexpected moment, her path crossed with a cruel injustice that would test her courage in ways she never imagined. What happened next wasn't just about her. It became a powerful reminder of what it truly means to stand up when silence feels safer. This is the story of an everyday hero, and why her fight still matters today. Marcus lived a life most would call ordinary. He woke up early, went to his job at the grocery store, and walked the same quiet streets home every evening. Friends knew him as gentle, reliable, the kind of person who never looked for trouble. But beneath the calm rhythm of his days, the world around him wasn't always as safe as it seemed. On this particular evening, as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the sidewalk, something felt different. A silence hung in the air, heavier than usual, as if the night itself was holding its breath. Marcus didn't know it yet, but he was about to be forced into a moment where his courage and his very humanity would be tested. Marcus kept his pace steady, but the silence of the street seemed to amplify every sound, his shoes striking the pavement, the faint rustle of leaves, and then another set of footsteps. He told himself it was nothing, just someone else heading home. But when he glanced at the reflection in a store window, he saw two men trailing him, their eyes fixed on him with an intensity that made his chest tighten. At first, he tried to shake it off. He adjusted his bag, crossed to the other side of the street. But they followed. Their pace matched his. Their whispers floated through the night, sharp enough to cut. "What's he doing here?" one of them muttered, just loud enough for Marcus to hear. His heart pounded faster. He wasn't doing anything wrong, just walking home after work. Yet in their eyes, his very presence seemed like an offense. He remembered stories he'd heard from friends, warnings about how quickly a simple misunderstanding could spiral into something far worse. One of the men quickened his steps. "Hey, you!" The voice sliced through the night air. Marcus froze for a second, then turned slowly, his pulse hammering in his ears. Their faces were hard, fueled by a mix of suspicion and something darker. Something that had nothing to do with him personally, yet everything to do with the color of his skin. "What are you carrying?" one demanded, pointing to Marcus's bag. His voice dripped with accusation, not curiosity. Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but before a word could leave his lips, the second man stepped closer, crowding him, his eyes unblinking. Marcus lifted his hands slightly, a silent gesture to show he had nothing to hide. But the gesture didn't calm them, it only seemed to embolden them. One shoved him lightly, testing boundaries as if daring him to react. The world narrowed in that instant. The quiet street, the cold air, the weight of two strangers deciding he didn't belong. Every second stretched longer, sharper, filled with the unspoken question: what would happen if he pushed back? If he raised his voice? If he defended himself in any way? He knew the answer could be dangerous. Still, something inside him stirred. He thought about the silence of so many before him, people who swallowed their pain, who kept their heads down just to survive. But he also thought about those who refused to be silent, who chose to stand up no matter the cost. The men closed in, their shadows blending into his, their words turning harsher, their tone daring him to make the wrong move. And Marcus realized that in this moment, a choice loomed before him: remain silent and hope it passed, or risk everything by confronting the very hatred that threatened to swallow him whole. The shove came harder this time, forcing Marcus back against the brick wall. His bag slipped to the ground, spilling nothing more than his work uniform and a worn notebook, but that didn't matter. To them, the contents were irrelevant. Their eyes weren't searching for truth. They were searching for an excuse. One of the men leaned closer, his breath hot and heavy, his finger jabbing into Marcus's chest. "You don't belong here," he hissed. The words weren't just a statement, they were a sentence, a reminder that in their world, Marcus's skin was already the crime. Fear clawed at his throat, urging him to stay silent, to comply, to shrink himself into safety. But another force rose stronger. The deep, burning knowledge that silence had cost too many lives already. His hands trembled, but he lifted his chin, meeting their eyes with a steady defiance he didn't know he had. The street seemed to hold its breath. The men stiffened at his refusal to bow, their faces twisting with anger. One reached out, gripping Marcus's arm with bruising force, yanking him forward as if daring him to resist. For a split second, Marcus saw the path before him. Humiliation, pain, maybe worse. But he also saw something else. The truth. If he surrendered now, he wouldn't just be protecting himself. He'd be feeding the very hatred that had cornered him. So, with a voice that shook but did not break, Marcus spoke. "I have every right to be here." The words cracked the silence like thunder. The men froze, not because they respected him, but because they hadn't expected it. In that moment, the weight of generations pressed into his voice, a refusal to vanish quietly. The night pulsed with danger. The grip on his arm tightened. His pulse roared in his ears. And then, just as the tension reached its peak, a sharp sound cut through the air, forcing everyone to turn. It was the sound that would decide what happened next. The sound that broke the tension was a passing car, headlights flooding the street. For a moment, the two men hesitated, their grip loosening as if the presence of another set of eyes threatened to expose them. Without a word, they stepped back, muttering under their breath, before disappearing into the shadows. Marcus stood frozen, his heart still hammering, the echo of their words carved into his memory. He gathered his things with shaking hands and walked the rest of the way home, but something inside him had changed. The fear remained, but so did a new fire, a quiet resolve. He realized that what happened to him wasn't just his burden. It was a piece of a larger truth, a truth lived by countless others whose stories never made it into the light. Injustice doesn't always arrive with flashing lights or headlines. Sometimes it comes in whispers on a dark street, in the eyes of strangers who decide you don't belong. And every time it does, it leaves scars that reach far beyond one person, one night, one life. Marcus's courage that evening was not about defeating hatred, it was about refusing to be erased by it. His story is a reminder that silence protects no one, and that even the smallest act of defiance can echo louder than fear. The question that remains is not whether these stories will keep happening. We know they will. The real question is, when they do, will we stand by in silence, or will we finally stand up and say enough?